everybody, and welcome to this career event with Compare the Market. A huge thank you to Compare the Market for sponsoring this event. They have come on board with CodeBar as a gold sponsor. So events like this wouldn't, happen without them. So a huge thank you for that support. A huge thank you to everyone else for coming today. Thank you for giving up your evening and coming along and asking questions. This is very much an open session, so do drop in any questions you have in the chat. I would rather your questions be asked than mine, and so do ask those. So on our panel today, we've got Sarah, who is a junior software engineer. We've also got Jordan, who is a junior software engineer. We've got Muireann, who is an application architect, and we've got Alan, who is associate director for platforms and operations. So I'm going to ask you all to do a short intro of yourself first, so everyone can get to know a little bit about who you are. So Sarah, could you take it away, please?
I'm a junior software engineer at Compare the Market, and I work on the rewards team. And we are mostly working with a JavaScript stack. And I transitioned from a care background. I used to be a care worker, and the route that I took was an apprenticeship. So I did an apprenticeship with Compare the Market and Makers Academy as the education provider. And then I transitioned to just being a regular developer at Compare the Market.
Thank you very much. Jordan, do you want to go next?
Hi, yeah, my name is Jordan. I also work at Compare the Market in the rewards team specifically as a junior software engineer. I, like Sarah as well, got onto the apprenticeship scheme BGO offers, which saw me do a 3-month stint with a training provider and then eventually work on site at the rewards team and Compare the Market. My original story is I had actually dabbled in web development before I'd got onto the apprenticeship scheme, basically teaching myself just the fundamentals and basics. And then eventually I saw myself very fortunate to get onto the apprenticeship scheme at CTM.
Cool, thank you very much. MG, do you want to go?
Sure, thank you. So my name is Muireann Gorton. I was going to say you can call me MG. I think most people do. And I'm an application architect here at Compare the Markets. I've been in tech for about 15 years now, so quite a chunk of time. But in that time, I've been lucky enough to move around quite a bit. So I've had a number of different roles in leadership, mentoring and kind of management, to hands-on coding, and to where I am now in the architecture space. So that's me. I've got 2 young children and I live in London.
Thank you very much. And our last panelist, Alan.
Hey, good evening. I'm Alan Richards. I'm the Associate Director for Platform and Operations at Compare the Market. I've been in and around tech for the last 25 years, which makes me feel really old. And I've held kind of professional roles in tech for the last 20 years. Started off working for internet service providers, moved over into the finance world, then spent some time in consulting, and now I'm at Compare the Market.
Cool, thank you very much. So those are our panelists. If you've got any questions for them, we've started having some questions come in, which is great. So if you've got any questions for any of them, please drop them in the chat. You can ask one panelist a particular question if you're, particularly keen in their job, or, we can open it up to them all. So it's completely up to you. My first question is, I want to know what your first job in tech was. Anyone can step in.
I can jump in if you like.
Yeah.
So I guess I got into tech in a very traditional way. So I did a degree course for 4 years in engineering. And then I took I think I kind of bummed around Canada for a bit, waitressing, which was fun. So my first real tech job was, I love traveling. I actually saw an ad for a job over in India for a year placement. So I kind of jumped at that chance. So it was a consulting company. And I was placed with Microsoft, which was great. So I kind of realized very quickly how slightly clueless I was and how little I knew really about software engineering. But I picked it up fairly quickly enough. We had some great teams there. And I think having that kind of slightly different mix and, being able to kind of combine travel and what my career aspirations as well was really, really looked out. So I definitely think about kind of look outside the box when you're looking for job roles. There's certainly a lot of interesting ones out there.
Cool. Does someone else want to go next?
Yeah.
Sure. No, go on, Jordan.
Yeah. My first role was my role currently as a junior software engineer at Compare the Market. It was I had got on it basically through an apprenticeship scheme we offer at CTM, and you can imagine everything is still quite shiny to me. Before that, I basically had no other experience in tech other than the experience I paid for myself in the comfort of my own bedroom, teaching myself JavaScript and HTML and CSS and all these other tools. So yeah, as you can imagine, things are still quite new to me. So yeah.
So are you a self-taught developer?
Technically, but I did get the extra bump when I trained through the training provider offered in the BGL apprenticeship scheme.
Oh, okay. Okay, Alan?
Yeah, so my first job was working for a fairly local internet service provider, and I'd been working on some software in the open source world for about 2 or so years before that they use really heavily, and they were looking for someone to come help them with it. So I jumped straight out of education, from high school education, straight into that job, and I absolutely loved it, and I've been doing it since then.
Thank you. Sarah?
My story is pretty much word for word the same as Jordan's. This is my first job in tech. And yeah, before this, I had a lot of failed attempts to get a job in tech, but I'm here now.
Cool, thank you. So we've got some questions coming in now. So I will move away from my ones because I want to ask yours rather than mine. And so the first one is just curious, have you done any events with Compare the Market? I'm guessing this is aimed at CodeBar, and have they hired people from CodeBar in the past? And so yes, Compare the Market have actually been one of our sponsors for a few years now, hosting our events in London and Peterborough. And I think between both of them, they've hosted over 30 of our workshops between the London and Peterborough chapters, which is great and hugely thankful. I'm not sure about the hiring. I don't know if anyone else wants to take that over. Has anyone from CodeBar been hired to Compare the Market?
Well, I'm not sure about CodeBar specifically, but we obviously do have quite an active apprenticeship scheme, and we do hire a lot of junior engineers as well, from a lot of the kind of bootcamp and trainings background as well. So we definitely take a lot of the kind of junior level input into Compare the Market, and a lot of career changers as well. I'm not sure about specifically CodeBar, but I do know that a lot of the juniors that we do get in have done either CodeBar or similar to CodeBar kind of events and work to kind of get the bit of experience that they need to kind of jump in at that level.
Hi, it's Sarah from the BGL group. I'm sorry, I've gate crashed. I'm actually responsible for the apprenticeship recruitment for BGL and hired Sarah and Jordan. So hi, I just wanted to let you know we actually have had some hires from CodeBar, which has been really positive from our experience. So we've hired apprentices in London and in our Peterborough offices.
Perfect. That's what I like to hear. Anything else before we move on to the next question? This is quite a broad one. How badly has the tech industry been impacted by the pandemic?
I'll happily pick that one up. I think it varies massively. I think the tech industry itself is really buoyant, and I think the demand for tech skills is still really high. I think some individual companies have struggled a little bit with their business models in the pandemic, and they've had to let people go in software roles. But the vast majority of organizations are still actively recruiting technical people in the same way that we are. And I think if you look at a lot of the big tech companies, they're very aggressively hiring, and everyone's turning to them to help solve their problems. So Zoom, for example, which we're on today, is a great example of an organization that's hiring lots of people because demand has gone up a lot.
Anything else anyone wants to add? Okay. Next question. What are the minimum knowledge requirements for a junior dev job? This is very broad.
If you're wondering whether you need to have like a computer science degree or anything like that, I would say, from my opinion anyway, no. Because basically how I got onto the apprenticeship scheme, I had to have like my GCSEs, my maths and English to prove I was competent in that respect. But besides that, no. I had to show I was like able to obviously pick up a language and learn it. But that's applicable to most people. Most people can learn like maybe Python, Ruby, JavaScript, and from that you can show that you can learn other languages. So if you're wondering whether you need a proper formal education, I'm on the side of I don't necessarily agree, but that will depend on what area of tech you're interested in getting into. So yeah, big depends. It depends.
I would add to that that in my experience applying and interviewing, what employers look for are your initiative on taking on projects, trying things out, taking on challenges, rather than any specific qualification. I think people can come from really varied backgrounds and really excel in software engineering. So I personally haven't noticed an emphasis on a degree or any particular qualification.
Yeah, just kind of echo that as well. I think most companies nowadays have kind of realized that there's a shift in how people get into tech, and you know, most good companies will have kept up with that. I think the key things that people look out for is you know, it's those kind of soft skills, I guess. It's those, you know, collaboration and communication and willingness and enthusiasm to learn, I think, are really the key things at the junior level. I think showing that you have obviously an interest in coding, if that's the kind of area of tech that you're looking to get into, just to show that you have done some kind of side projects or some, you know, that you've kind of taken a few steps to kind of get along that path is always good. But I don't think there's anything, exactly as Sarah and Jordan have said, there's no strict, you know, qualifications, oh, you need a degree or you need this thing to get into the junior levels at a lot of the companies.
Anything else? No? Okay. The next question, what is the main technical stack in Compare the Market? Now, this may vary between teams. I'm not sure how it works at Compare the Market. You know, you all may have different answers, so I'll let you take it away.
Well, the main tech stack in my team in Rewards is, I hope you enjoy using these tools because they're really fun to use. The Muireann stack, if you're not already aware of it. So that's with MongoDB, React, Express, Node. Obviously, there's some other tools we use, like we use like monitoring tools like Prometheus. But you'll find that you will begin to grow an appetite to working with so many other tools. But yeah, that is the main stack we use in my team.
Yeah, I also work in the rewards team, but I will, so that's the stuff I'm working with as well. But I will say that across Compare the Market, there's so many opportunities to work with different stacks. We have an Android team, we have an iOS team. There's opportunities. I've seen opportunities in like innovation weeks to work with machine learning. So it's really exciting to see people working on so many different technologies. And yeah, it's definitely a place where there's a lot of opportunity to try different things.
Yeah, so we're really focused on kind of optimizing the developer experience around Node and around React. They're the two kind of big languages that we use. Also C# as well. We try and run as much as we can on Kubernetes, and we try and run it all inside of AWS as much as possible. I think Jordan was saying we love MongoDB. We've got lots and lots and lots of that. We've then got a whole suite of tools that go around supporting it. So the usual kind of Prometheus, Grafana, Splunk, etc. We're doing lots of experimentation with CI/CD tools at the moment. We work with some very small startups like Ops Level who do microservice inventories. Doing some really cool work with them at the minute. Trying to think of anything else that's really valuable to it. There's a lot of things that we do that are outside of that as well. So like our data engineering teams, for example, don't particularly find that stack helpful to them. So they use a lot more Java, a lot more Python, a lot more Scala, and they use a lot more kind of Kafka, for example, versus any of the other messaging technologies that we use. So big variance, but the focus is to really optimize the experience on Node and React.
Thank you for that. Anything else before we move on to the next question? So lots of options, basically, if you want to work at Compare the Market. Next question, are more companies going towards a hybrid cloud infrastructure rather than fully cloud?
I'll go for that one. So I think personally I have a really strong opinion on this, which is you should be as cloud as much as you can, right? And focus your engineering effort on the differentiation that you can bring to the world. So Compare the Market, we are predominantly in AWS. We do still have some on-premise pieces. I noticed somebody asked the question of what's BGL. BGL is our parent company, and we use their data centers rather than having our own, for example. In terms of the hybrid cloud piece of it, I see that as a stopgap between getting into cloud wholly. There are use cases where all in cloud maybe doesn't work, but for us, we're very much on that all in cloud journey.
Cool. Anything else to add to that? Next question. How to best prepare for an interview and what skills for a junior engineering role? So how best to prepare for an interview?
What saw me, for me personally, in terms of what benefited me was creating projects and showcasing that in your interviews. Well, based on my experience, I'll give you a little down low on some of my history. Before I actually had got onto the apprenticeship scheme with BGL, I actually was creating projects in my own time, and I didn't know why I was so confident, but I just started applying for jobs, like even mid-level roles that I had no business applying for, and I actually got interviews. And I would talk to these employers and they would look at my projects and they'd be impressed, but they maybe had a bit of hesitancy about employing someone with maybe 4 months of experience. But I didn't use that. That didn't turn me down. It didn't make me feel bad. I knew I was going in the right direction. So in terms of what I saw, impress employers would be create projects, pull it on your resume, create a GitHub, showcase that to your employers, let them see that. Let them see that you're passionate about what you're trying to get into. That will go a long way.
Yeah,
Sorry, go on.
No, go for it.
So I think what I'm always looking for when I'm doing an interview is the enthusiasm and the preparedness that Jordan was talking about. I'm also looking for kind of how do you demonstrate a really clear interest. So if I see a GitHub link on someone's CV, I love that. That's the first thing I go look at, and I start looking at what's the structure of their code, how have they thought about it, how have they gone and modified it. It gives me a lot of insight to you before you even step through the door. and it gives me an opportunity to ask a series of questions that you definitely know the answers to, right? Because you wrote that code and you can show your opinions. So I'm always keen to see those. I always want people to be really prepared for what's the role, what does it do, have you done your research around what the organization does, why this role might be really valuable to us. But I also want to see what you want to know in real time. So ask us lots of questions in the interview that are relevant to the role and relevant to what your experience of that role will be. And then finally, on the technical side of things, know your types, know your structures, kind of know the reason why to use version A or version B of something, and just have some confidence in that and really be prepared for it.
Yeah, so I was just going to say, it's kind of echoing what everyone else has said, but it's also an opportunity for you, I suppose, to get a feel for whether the company is good for you, and whether, you know, it's kind of a two-way process, right? It's not, you know, hey, give me the job. It's also an opportunity, kind of what Alan said about being there to ask questions, really ensuring that the job that you're going for is good for you as well. And I think somebody who kind of comes to an interview with that attitude is always kind of like impressive, and somebody that has, yeah, really prepared and really, Alan and Jordan has already said this, but really really passionate, and really showing that passion through for coding, I think is really the key things that we look for.
I think the really good thing about showing off Git projects as well is you can have like a really nice Git history of like your progress. So the person looking can see your process. And even if then 6 months later you go back and change the code, you know, you can have your Git commit message can say, this is what I've learned over 6 months, and they can look at that difference and say, actually, in the space of 6 months, I can see how much this person has learned. Or even if it's a month, you know, if it's a month between these two, you know, these Git commits of like your changes, they'll think, oh, well, actually, look how much this person's learned in a month. Like I can see by the code, they're proving to me that they're a very quick learner. And that's one thing that I really like looking at, is like the Git history of people's projects as well. Because it can really give you an idea of the way someone works and their thought process. Anything on that? Anything else on that before we move on?
I'll just add, in my experience of interviews, sometimes you'll be asked competency-based questions, which is something that are quite easy to prepare for, because there's lots of information online about them, about how to structure them, and it's an opportunity to show how your experience that might not be technical experience is still relevant to who you are as a person and what it brings to you as in your technical career going forward. So I found that a really valuable experience going through that and structuring that before the interview, and it helped me go into the interview really confident about what I had, the ideas that I had prepared.
Thank you. Anything else? This next question is great. Is there anything integral to your job that you didn't know how to do before you started? I can see Alan nodding. Yep.
You want me to go first? I was talking about some stuff today. We're regulated by the FCA, and we have to do a series of activities relating to operational resilience, and my job title contains the word operations. So we've decided that it's my thing I've got to deal with. So I'm now looking at how the whole organization looks at operations from end to end, every single business process. That's way outside my comfort zone, right? I am used to technology operations and kind of spending my day to day in subjects I really understand, right? I don't understand insurance markets in anywhere near as well as people at Compare the Market do. I don't understand comparison anywhere near as well as other people. So how do I get out of that comfort zone and start to take that kind of challenge on? It's scary, but it's also fun to realize how much I'm going to learn throughout that. So it's probably a really good example just from today.
Yeah, I think as well, in terms of not knowing the things that you'd learned in your job that you didn't know beforehand, I think it's like almost everything, I imagine. I think every job is going to be you know, completely different, but often very, very different from any other job. And even if it's the same role, the team that you work with and the you know, the people that you work with and the type of you know, software that you produce is going to be, you know, entirely different in almost every role. So I think most days I learn something new, at least one new thing every day. And I think that's kind of the great thing about tech. It's that, you know, there's always something different. There's always new problems and new challenges and, you know, new things to learn and new ways of doing things. And I think that's, I guess one of the great things about tech is also one of the really hard things, that you have to continually kind of push yourself and keep learning new things every day and keep, you know, on top of everything, really, which is it's great fun, and it's awesome to be in an industry where, you know, that you get to do that, right? That you get to go, hey, this is something new, this is something different that I didn't know. So it's one of the things I love about it.
Yeah, I could echo some of the same sentiments. Like, I didn't know so much about so many of the tools we use in my team, like Prometheus, Kubernetes. I mean, even GitHub. Like, as much as I encourage you guys to have a GitHub if you don't already to host your projects, I didn't know more about some of the features that we use every day in our team, like open pull requests. I know, simple as it sounds, like open pull requests, rebasing, merging, so many things that I didn't conceive as like a newbie trying to get into tech, but you will eventually learn and eventually use on a daily basis if you're going to become a junior developer. But yeah, don't get scared. You eventually learn it.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Sorry. I would say, like, the opposite question would be a shorter answer. But as a junior, you do get a lot of time. Hopefully, in other companies too, you get a lot of time to learn the technologies that you will be using in your team. So there is that time to kind of like catch up, and at the same time pairing with people in the team to understand the estate that you're working with. That it's totally expected that you won't know things when you arrive. So don't be scared of that.
Anything else to add, MG?
Yeah, I was just going to say, just to echo what Sarah and Jordan has said, I think that's a great shout to say, you know, don't get scared. You kind of, in every new role, you have the gist of what it is, but a lot of the time is you learn on the job. And especially for like some of the junior roles, the expectation is more around kind of attitude and you know, how you approach problems, and you're not expected to know everything. You can't know everything about everything. It's impossible. But it's the attitude and the approach that you take things is really important.
True story. In my degree, so I actually did a degree. It wasn't quite computing, but I didn't know Git was a thing because it wasn't taught. And so at the end of every day, when doing my big final major project, I would recopy my folder into Dropbox. And actually, I got my job out of uni having never done any Git before. But they were like, well, she'll learn. She's passionate. It just doesn't matter that she doesn't know this one skill. She can learn on the job. And so, yeah, I was copy and pasting in Dropbox for a year, and I didn't know Git. That was 8 years ago, but it's, you know, it still stands. And I think it, you know, echoes what everyone was saying, that, you know, it's okay not to know certain things because you will learn, you know, on the job. Next question, which route is best? Graduate scheme, apprenticeship, or junior entry-level job in software engineering?
The above. I think whatever gets you into something you're passionate about is probably the right way. I know at Compare the Market there's no real differentiation between them, except things like the graduate scheme tries to rotate you a little bit more than the other schemes, for example. And coming in just as an entry-level engineer, you're just, you know, on the same path as everybody else is. And similar for the apprenticeship scheme, right? We're trying to develop all the talent at all the levels in the organization, and the entry point is probably not the most important part from kind of a management perspective. It's more about what you do once you're in. Maybe the others have got slightly different views, but that's how I see it.
No, I think it's definitely that. It's whatever gets your foot in the door, really. From CCN's point of view, we don't like take a view on which is the better route. It's definitely the person in front of you at the interview, and not kind of, you know, what's written on their CV, or what's, you know, dictated there. So I think exactly as Alan said, it's whatever kind of gets you there and whatever kind of fills the passion for you.
And later on in your career, most people will be looking at what you've been doing the last 2 or 3 years, not what you did 5, 6, 7 years ago, right? They'll be really focused on what you can do today, not which route you took in. I know for myself, I came through a completely non-education route, and that maybe held me back for the first 2 or 3 years. And after that, it's never been talked about.
Okay. Next question. This is specifically for Sarah and Jordan. Can you confirm what route you went through in order to get into the role you are today? So your role at Compare the Market, what route you went through?
Yeah, so me and Sarah went through an apprenticeship scheme at BGL. So that entailed basically us initially starting off doing a 3-month stint with a training provider, where we would train with a bunch of other people who were also interested in tech, and we would learn the fundamentals of programming. And our first language actually was, I believe it was Ruby, wasn't it? So yeah, Ruby. And yeah, so that gave us the fundamentals. And then after that, we basically continued our training and development on site at Compare the Market. And we had the option of choosing which team we wanted to working based on the technologies what we were interested in. So yeah, that's pretty much how that looked like.
Yeah, not much to add to that. So for us, I guess the route is, so because we were part of the apprenticeship, the job is the route. Before the apprenticeship, I didn't have, I don't know, like an A-level in ICT or anything like that. It was, as part of the interview stage, we had to do a coding academy course in Ruby, and then do a test to see that you could apply the skills that you'd learned in that course. And then there was a series of interviews, and then we were successful in getting onto the apprenticeship. Yeah, and the course is so the course, as part of the apprenticeship, the Makers Bootcamp is included, is paid for by CTM, and then you go, and as Jordan said, you would go on to the placement at CTM, Compare the Market, if that's not clear.
Thank you. Okay, the next question. How is your working week structured? And that's for each of you. It says specifically for software engineers, but I think the question is relevant to all of you. So yeah, your working week.
Well, the structure, typically you will find that you have meetings. So there's no escaping. So typically we will have pre-refinement sessions in the morning. Actually, let me start back. We'll have a stand-up session in the morning, and that will typically entail us describing what we might have been working on, what we plan to work on that given day. And then we'll also have pre-refinement sessions where we will look at tickets that have been recently written to kind of like make sure everyone's on the same page, and making sure all the information is there for everyone to understand and read. And each and everyone in the team will work on a ticket that they've allocated to themselves. No 2 days are ever really the same, so that's always fun. Each day presents new challenges, so yeah, it's really exciting.
I will say that we do Scrum mostly, I think, at Compare the Market. So there is like a number of ceremonies that almost every engineer, I think, goes through every day, doing stand-ups and retros and weekly ceremonies, essentially. So I think that's kind of like typical mostly across the board. I'd say most tech companies now are using some form of kind of agile working practices. So I think some time is spent on that. And I think a lot of the time they spent pairing as well. I think Jordan, Sarah, you mentioned this previously as well. Again, it's kind of becoming more of a kind of a standard, I suppose, across the board, where you'll often work alongside other developers to kind of produce the code. And so it's not kind of like working in isolation, I think, as much anymore. Although obviously some people still do.
Anything else to add?
I think.
Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
No, go ahead.
I was just going to say, just adding on to what's already been said, that there'll be opportunities to contribute to each part of the product that you're working on. So if you have ideas about the design of the product that you're working on, then it's completely open for you to bring those up, and that can influence the direction that the product takes. Yeah, that's just wanted to add that because I think that's cool.
Yeah, I tend to spend an awful lot of my days trying to unblock people. So where the organization's got in the way, or where another team is maybe not kind of in the same place as one of my teams, for example, and trying to help bring the organization together and drive through a lot of those blockers. I also spend a lot of my time talking about money because that's apparently what I have to do. And I spend probably an awful lot of time talking to individuals in the team, so different kind of senior technical people or different leaders in different teams, about how we all stay on the same page together and how we all kind of move forward together. And if there's anything that my part of the organization can do to drive that forward, get that as part of our strategy.
Thank you. Okay, next question. How do you promote yourself when there are heaps of other developers out there? Tough question.
I suppose that there's heaps of developers, there's also heaps of jobs, I guess, is the important thing to keep in mind. You know, I think it is a tough market, but there is you know, lots of jobs out there. I think keep looking and keep you know, keep an eye out on what actually is available in certain lots of places. I think, as was kind of already mentioned before, showing that you have an interest and previous experience in certain places in developing the code kind of in your own time as a junior, and showing that kind of that passion and that comes through, I think, quite well if you can kind of show some of the kind of previous experience that you have in those areas, and listing as well all of the experiences that you've got in other locations. So in other jobs, they can very often have transferable skills into tech as well. Any of the kind of communication and collaboration, any of the kind of problem solving or critical thinking. These are all kind of key skills as well that are definitely transferable. And even if you haven't achieved these in a tech sphere, just highlighting them from wherever your previous work experience, I think, is definitely key.
Anything else to add to that?
Yeah, I echo a lot of what MG's already said. Obviously, as having a GitHub with projects that you've worked on will definitely go a long way as well. Even going to coding events like these and finding maybe local coding clubs near you where you can potentially work with people you have never met before and might end up being friends with, that will also look good. So yeah, definitely putting yourself out there will go a long way. But like MG's already said, there's many roles in the tech industry out there.
Okay, We've got so many questions coming in, so I'm gonna move on. We've had one: how difficult is the industry for tech returners and career changers? So for both. Alan?
It's a fantastic, interesting subject that I've worked with quite a few people on this over the last few years. I think getting back into a good role is the most challenging part of it, and kind of getting your skills up to the level they used to be if you're returning as a somebody used to work in technology, or if you're completely career changing, getting your skill set to a level that is kind of really employable. There's a bunch of really helpful groups out there which are focused on this. I'd engage with them. They've got some really good tips and advice on how to get in. A lot of those groups also have really good relationships with companies, because we're always looking to find ways of diversifying the talent that we bring in. And they offer kind of very similar to Makers, where they offer like a gap between them. So they're really valuable. In terms of, if I was to see a CV that had a 2-year break in it, but the rest of it looked fantastic, I'd happily interview that person and happily go through how they're going to get back on track and how they're going to get to the level and how they catch up with the different pieces of technology. I think most people are really open to doing that these days, where maybe they weren't before.
Yeah, I think especially as someone who has, well, just taken a career break, but taken, the kind of extended maternity leaves and coming back in, it can be quite daunting, because you're always worried about, oh, what have I missed while I was away? What's happened, and how do I actually, fit back into it? And I think a lot of the time it's just having the nerve to do it. I think the hardest part is just, putting yourself out there and trying to get back in. I think, as Alan says, it's from an employer's point of view, as long as you can explain any kind of career gap or reason that you haven't been working for a few years, employers don't see that as an issue. So I think a lot of the time it's kind of almost a mental block for people themselves, or it certainly was for me anyway, to try and kind of going, oh, okay, how do I get myself up to skill again? And in a way, what we've already talked about is a lot of it it's just attitude. It's just having the ability to learn the specifics about, knowing this thing about this particular language, or knowing this. It's all learnable as long as you have the right attitude. And for a lot of the time, people don't look for, oh, hey, they got this one tech question wrong, therefore they're terrible. That's definitely not how kind of employers view things. It's all about attitude. So as long as you can prove that you're really passionate about it, and that you really do want to get back into it, and as Alan said, these are the kind of the steps that I'm going to take to get there. It's not really a blocker for anyone.
Cool, thank you.
I was just going to add, from the point of view of career changer, just not. I wanted to say, just don't forget all of the skills that you've learned in whatever career you've come from are going to be completely applicable here too. The soft skills that you learn and organizational skills are all things that you're going to be able to apply in this career. So it's important not to forget that you are more than what your technical background might be, and to bring that into your interviews as well.
Yeah, that's a really, really valid point. Someone has said, are apprenticeships viable for career changes if you're older than 30?
Yes.
For in the cohort that me and Jordan were in, it was a really wide age bracket, and there wasn't any higher age bracket. I know that some companies do have that, because I think because of funding reasons, but it's definitely possible, and I would go for it. I wouldn't let it stop you in any way.
Yeah, I think it's with tech as well. It's one of these great things that, when you get into it, you get off the ground really fast. It's not like there are, years of training before you kind of get near a computer and get to start, doing some fun coding stuff. So I think definitely from a kind of a career changes point of view, there is no real upper limit to when you can get into it. So if it's something that you're interested in doing, then definitely go for it.
Cool. Anything else to add? One for Jordan and Sarah. How long did it take you to move from an apprentice to a junior developer?
So it was so the apprenticeship itself is 15 months. So after your 3-month stint at the training provider, it's another 12 months placement. So once that ends, you technically become a junior developer without the apprentice. So
it is if you can kind of choose how much emphasis you want to put the work, because there's apprenticeship work as well as your work as a developer, and if you want to take longer to finish your apprenticeship, then that's an option that you can take if you'd rather be focusing on the work. But yeah, you're entitled to one learning day each week, and it's kind of flexible as to when you finish. But yeah, the kind of headline is 15 months, but with some flexibility.
Thank you. Next question. Do you think ageism is an issue in the tech industry? Have you seen it / experienced it at all?
I don't know which end of the spectrum the question's being asked from, but I remember as a very young engineer, I used to surprise people a lot. They wouldn't expect the kind of the work that I was producing, and I don't think they would have given me the same opportunities had I not given those things. So I think that the younger you are, the less seriously people take you. That's it's a very generic societal thing, but my answer to that is proven wrong, right? If you can do it. If you can't, learn how to do it and do it. So that's kind of the young end of the spectrum side of things. I think when I'm looking at kind of young people wanting to get into tech, I see the enthusiasm, I see kind of how passionate they are about it, and that attracts me to them to try and bring them into the organization. So I'm not sure what it's like broadly, but I don't think young people get a particularly bad ride in tech. And I've worked with people in their 60s in technology, and they were absolutely fantastic at it. They were well respected. Some of them had been doing it for 20, 30 years when I'd been doing it for 2-3 years, and it seemed like a lifetime. And they were well respected inside the organizations. People looked at the kind of the pedigree that they built over the years and really enjoyed working with them. So I've not particularly seen it at either end of the spectrum. We're an industry that's short of very talented people. Why would we ignore people based on their age? I don't know why we would want to do that.
Yeah, I think it's becoming, I think it's kind of as the kind of tech industry grows that there are kind of more mature people at the various different levels as well. I think, we talk about the tech industry as something, it feels like it's been there forever, but it really hasn't. It's quite a new concept, really. It's quite a new idea, and it's only like what, 60 years or 70 years that's been around in any kind of meaningful scale. And I think certainly the growth in the last decade or 20, 30 years has been like extraordinarily massive. And so even if it wasn't that visible, maybe 20 years ago when I started, there wasn't a huge number of older people kind of at the more junior or mid-level roles, simply because it wasn't an industry that kind of had that kind of length of time for people to have stayed that long. But certainly now it is becoming more and more common for people to be much older and in kind of various degrees, junior and mid and senior, and all the way up as well. So I think it's something that's kind of changing. But I certainly haven't seen anything of kind of obviously discrimination based on kind of any age related characteristics. in my career, but it's possible I just never was exposed to it.
Thank you. Next question. How does the apprenticeship work? So Jordan or Sarah, how does it work?
Yeah, like we've kind of echoed before, how it will work is that the apprenticeship scheme will basically allow you to get a level 4 software engineering apprenticeship certificate, which will look good on your CV. But like I already said, it's not necessarily the end all be all. But how the scheme works is that you apply, part of the application process, you will have to learn Ruby on Code Academy in your own time. Once you've shown proficiency in the interview process, you will have another interview with someone from BGL, and assuming you get onto the apprenticeship scheme, you will have to train at Makers Academy, which is a training provider BGL offers. And then once that ends, you will start at your placement at CTM. So you can choose whatever team to work with, and that could be depending on what technologies you're interested in working on. So for me, I was interested in working with Mongo, React, Node, Express, and I continue to enjoy working with those tools today. So that's basically an overlay of how the scheme essentially works.
Anything else?
Pretty comprehensive. Pretty comprehensive. Not much to add to that.
For anyone interested in makers in general, we're actually launching a scholarship with them on Monday, where 6 people from codebar will get to do the bootcamp for free. And so yeah, that's on our socials, that's in our Slack as well. And so yeah, you know, as Jordan mentioned, you know, it's a good boot camp. And so yeah, scholarship for 6 spaces, which is exciting. How would I enter the world of tech from social care and of a certain age?
I entered the world of tech from a background in social care. And it was actually really having that background and then coming into tech was really inspiring for me, because I could think about as I learn more tools, the programs that I could build to make my clients' lives easier, and I found that really inspiring. I would definitely recommend try using that if it is something that you've enjoyed working in, using that to motivate you in terms of your self-study and your learning. If you could think of like programs that you could build and see and kind of play around with that. And I don't want to, I haven't come from the background of like maybe an older person, but I haven't seen it at CTM at Compare the Market that would in any way stop you from being able to go out there and get a job in tech. I think, you know, any company who is going to display that, as horrible as it is, but it does happen, is obviously not the company that you want to be working at, and like it's their loss. So yeah, just I really encourage you to keep going and yeah, carry on.
I liked that movement, just, you know.
Sling your hook.
Sling your hook. Okay, next question is for you, Alan. What would you say were the differences between working from consultancy to Compare the Market?
I think the big difference is your variety in consulting comes from the types of client that you work with, and you can never really get too much in depth with them. So you have to kind of accept that breadth is going to be your variance. Whereas somewhere like Compare the Market, depth becomes your variance, right? How much you can get into a subject versus how much you can come out of it. You're obviously limited to the sector the organization's in and the the product offerings that we have, but you can spend much more time getting deeper into those.
Oh, thank you. We've had a few more comments on ageism, which seems to be quite a hot topic for this. But yeah, someone has said worried that ageism is a thing in tech. Would like to ask thoughts on mature undergraduates. We've spoken about it a fair amount, so I don't know if anyone's got anything to add to that maybe they've not said before we move on to another question.
No, other than I think just don't let it hold you back. That I think the best way, you know, if there is such a thing there, as I say, I don't think any of us have come across it, but that doesn't necessarily mean that it's not there. I think the best way to challenge that and the best way to kind of break that down is by, you know, putting yourself forward and you know, going for these roles, you know, do it, and kind of being a leader in that area if needs be.
Yeah, definitely. Okay. Next question. Worried about race being a barrier. How real is this?
I think it's very similar to the answers on age, really. Again, when I'm looking for what's a good candidate for a role, I'm trying to find out what their experience looks like and what they've worked on and what their contribution is and how passionate they are about the subject. And it doesn't enter too much for me. Where I think the big challenge is how do you get in the first place? And there's loads of great opportunities to get involved. Like codebar is a great place, right, where you can start to build some of that knowledge and build some of that experience and learn how to do things. I think it's a lot of organizations are trying to pull together kind of inclusivity programs because they don't represent society today. So we're really keen to bring people in who are qualified from different backgrounds. So it shouldn't be a barrier.
Yeah, it's something I've been happy to see CTM try to do in terms of bringing people from ethnic minority backgrounds, trying to include people from a range of backgrounds. Because initially, when I got into tech, or when I had the ideas of getting into tech, I had the thoughts in my mind thinking like, I don't really quite see many people who look like me do this thing, and it kind of held me back a little bit. But like, because the opportunity was there, I couldn't help but take it. And there, I can say there are people. Obviously, there are people with a range of different backgrounds in tech, but maybe there isn't enough. And but we're slow. I think the tech industry is slowly trying to get to that point. So it's nice to see companies like Compare the Market trying to be one of the leaders of that.
Yeah, I want to shout out two other organisations as well. Like, thank you, Alan, for mentioning codebar, but Coding Black Females and Coders of Colour are two other organisations that are doing incredible work. The apprenticeship programme that I mentioned we're doing with Makers, they've given the same opportunity to Coding Black Females. So 6 people from their community are going to get on their apprenticeship as well. So yeah, those are two other organisations, you know, who are out there also doing incredible things. Anything else to add on that topic? Cool. Does it matter for the apprenticeship what your previous education is?
It
No.
matters.
Oh, sorry, go on.
It matters in so much as you do need English or maths GCSE or equivalent at C or above. But other than that, no.
Perfect. Someone's asked, how is the interview process and what is it?
For the apprenticeship scheme?
Yeah.
Yeah. The interview process, it's not short, I'm not gonna lie, but like but typically you will have a phone call interview with someone from BGL who will basically try to explore how passionate you are about coding, because one of the benefits of the application process is that you don't have to show any formal education in like maybe computer science or anything like that. And then after that, if you're deemed worthy, then you'll also have to go through an application process with the training provider, which is Makers Academy in this sense, where you will have to learn Ruby and via Code Academy and complete like a small little run of tasks. And once that stage is complete, then you will have to have another phone call interview with someone from Makers Academy who will also vet you further. And the next stage will be an in-person interview with someone at Compare the Market, who will basically read through your history, and they will try to get to the bottom of what kind of technologies you're interested in, and if you pass that successfully, then the next step would be to start at your 3-month stint at the training provider, Makers Academy. So it's not a short process, but you'll be very thankful once you make it to the other side.
And Sarah, do you have any tips for anyone who is thinking of maybe applying for the interview process? Any tips?
So yeah, when you go through the Ruby course on Code Academy, if you think about the kinds of challenges that you might be asked, I think there's like, if I don't know if any of you have heard of Code Wars, but Code Wars is a great website for trying different challenges in different languages. I think that would be a good exercise. Just to add as well that when me and Jordan started, it was pre-COVID times, but now the interviews will not be in person, and for the time being. I don't think I have any more tips. Just I think we've covered so much, but yeah, just go in and be confident, and whatever happens, it will be a really great learning experience that you can take on to your next interview. So yeah.
And what about preparing for the coding part of the interview? Anything that people should particularly look out for that, or like practice beforehand? Yeah, any tips for the coding bit in particular?
Well, the cool thing about it is that during that stage of the interview process, is they will provide you, Makers Academy will provide you links to where you can learn more about Ruby in this case. So via Code Academy, you can actually teach yourself about the fundamentals of Ruby before you actually take the test that you'll have to eventually do in order to make it to the next stage. So I wouldn't be scared about it. It's not as daunting as I perhaps have made it out to be. But yeah, they will provide you any help and assistance if you need any.
I think, is it Katas is the other one that they do? I've just tried to Google it, but I can't find it. Is it Code Kata that Makers do?
Yeah, Code Kata.
Yeah, I'll drop a link to that, because this is the other one, and I don't think that's it. I'm just trying to find it now. I'll find a link and try to share it, but I know the Makers application, you have to get to like a certain level in the Katas as well. And the Katas are really good. The way they do it is they give you a problem and you have to solve the problem, and then they'll go, oh, you solved it this way. Here are a few other ways you could have solved it. And so it's quite a nice way of like problem solving and getting your brain thinking logically, which is essentially what programming is. And I really like that it shows you, oh, here's some other ways you could do it, and here's how other people did it. It's just a nice way of, again, like code can be written in so many different ways. I think it's quite a realistic way of giving you problems, and that's the other thing I think Makers do, is the Code Academy and Katas. And we get people at CodeBar doing both as well. We get people coming to our workshops saying, you know, I'm stuck on this Kata, or I'm doing, you know, the Ruby or Python, you know, Code Academy. So it's also something that you can bring to CodeBar and get support with. You don't just have to do our tutorials. Okay, I'm due to start GA General Assembly SEI course. I'm not sure what that is. In March. Any advice on other languages I should teach myself? Career switcher at 38, so everything is new to me.
If you're trying to learn every language before you start your first role, I wouldn't do that, because well, I almost made that mistake when I tried to get into tech. I was trying to learn everything because I thought that's what you had to do. And I realized I was spinning my wheels. I wasn't actually learning at the rate that I wanted to. So when I actually really like sunk my fingers into one language and really explored it, maybe I wasn't super versed in like maybe Python, but like I could understand things a lot more easily because I had like a good grasp of one language. So I wouldn't spread yourself thin if that's what you're thinking.
I think that's great advice, Jordan, right? I think know one thing, know it well, and if you're applying for a job that's not the language for, show that you understand the structure, show that you understand the logic, show that you can transfer that to something else, because the easy bit's learning the language, the hard bit is the logic, right? So if you can demonstrate all that logic for one language, it's normally very easy to move to the others. In the time that I've worked in technology, I've probably wrote 7 or 8 different languages, and changed for really good reasons, and changed because I needed to, or changed because I wanted to, or changed because it was a much better way of doing it. So I find that they're a lot more interchangeable than people think, but what you really want to demonstrate is logic.
Yeah, I definitely echo that as well. And again, it's the same. I've changed a lot of different languages over the years. I think I will say that just to kind of put a slightly different spin on it, is that think about where you kind of career wants to go. Like if you wanted to go down like a data engineering type of route, or if you wanted to go down more of a kind of web development or server-side development, and kind of look at the languages, I suppose, that would more typically be used in those spheres. But if you didn't know and you're going, hey, I want to do tech, I don't know what it is that I want to do yet, then yeah, definitely just exactly echoing what Jordan and Alan said, just focus on exactly the logic and how to structure things rather than a specific language.
Oh, we've got so many more questions and I'm now like, we only have 10 minutes. Okay, let's do some fire questions and see if we can get, I can see 59 new messages, and so I'm going to do the next couple of minutes is going to be some fire questions. Okay, what are the specifics that you look for in a resume?
That people have learned things. That's the key piece, right? Seeing that they've made progression throughout that career, seeing that they've picked up new things, new technologies. If I see a role that was, in 2004, I expect to see 2004 technologies. If I see something in 2010, I expect to see 2010 technologies. Yeah. Right. So I think showing that progression over the years is key for me.
I think for me, it's all about the soft skills more. I think it's about showing that you kind of demonstrated that you have worked with the team well, that you have done things outside of just, putting your head down and coding, that it's, you understand that there is more involved to tech than that. And it's showing that you can, interact with others, that you can problem solve, that you can wear a lot of hats, I suppose. So seeing some evidence of that in the CV for me is critical.
Can you do the apprenticeship in London, or do you have to be in Peterborough?
You can do it in London and Peterborough. I can't commit to this, but I think that it's optional to go remote now because of the current pandemic. But I'd have to check that one.
We're all remote at the minute. The actual apprenticeships are London and Peterborough, but obviously there's no offices to go into at the minute, so they would be remote, but there would be a tie back to one of those locations.
Thanks, Anna.
Okay. One for Sarah. What difficulties did you face getting into the tech industry?
Well, I didn't have a technical background in the slightest, so I guess getting over the biggest hurdle to get over was that kind of disbelief of I'm going to be in tech now. Okay. That's never something that I had envisioned, and so I think when you are that kind of person, and perhaps also as women, that you can be questioned, like, well, you've never been interested in this, and where's this come from? And I wouldn't let that like get in your way, because that can, if you're already doubting yourself and you're hearing that from other people, that can be an obstacle. But it's completely possible, and I've never been fulfilled in a job as I am now. So yeah, I think I keep repeating myself, but just keep going, and if it's your dream, then just carry on and go for it.
I like that. Follow the dream. Do you think that the demand caused by the pandemic has created demand for more experienced developers and less demand for entry-level developers?
No is the short answer. I think that the demand for engineers at all levels is really high, right? So when we're looking at very senior engineers, we have a very small pool to work from. So we know that the long-term answer's got to be to build a junior pool that will eventually become those roles. And if we don't invest in both sides of that, we won't get enough senior engineers in the future, and we need them. So we're totally investing at both the junior end, but also at the senior end.
Thank you. Got a question here on personal statement. How long should a personal statement be, and what do you want to read on it, and what do you not want to read on it?
For me, I think it's just no more than a paragraph. I think just a short statement above. I think most of your experience should come from or most of the input from the CV comes from your actual experience and what you've done. The usual things, I suppose, that I don't want to see in a stuff. If it's all about kind of, I want to see that you've taken responsibility for stuff, so that you've shown what you have done as opposed to what somebody else has done. But coming across as kind of like an arrogant or kind of, hey, I've done absolutely everything and no one helped me with some stuff like that is a real no-no. But you still want to be upfront about what you have done and what you have achieved. In that opening paragraph is really key, and I think that's the place to shine and to show your kind of key skills on the CV. So I think it just needs to be kind of punchy, pull out those kind of really key skills that you have, or what you think are the kind of key contributions that you can make to a company.
Yeah, for me, it's short and sweet is really important, because sometimes you're reading 100 of them in a day, right? And one that's 4 or 5 pages, you won't get anywhere near through it. You want to highlight the skills that you have that are the most relevant to that role, right? It allows you to keep your CV fairly generic and how you'd normally approach it, but your statement is all about connecting with the person who's looking to fill that role. So the way you do that is you highlight the most important parts of your career and your history and your attitude and your opinions of the world in that 1 or 2 paragraphs. And bring it to life for me. That's what typically gets me reading a bit further down.
Thank you. And one for you, Alan. How many projects should I have on my portfolio when I apply for a junior position?
At least 1. So I think a lot of people take the approach of, I need like 10 things, and they don't put the required effort into the 10 things, because it's really hard to look after 10 different things. So I would rather see a series of very small contributions to somebody else's project than a big thing that you've made yourself, right? Because it shows you can work well with others, it shows you can interact well with others, it shows you can take an interest in something that's not just what you're thinking about. It also shows that you're willing to contribute to a community rather than just work with yourself as well. So 1, fantastic. If you had got 1 or 2 little demo things that you had and a series of contributions to a few minor libraries here or there, I'd love that profile. I'd enjoy the interview, asking the questions about the different parts they've worked on in the past.
Yeah, the collaboration as well, like contributing to other projects shows that collaboration, which is what you do on a team, right? Like that's the top skill really you need. Okay. How does one investigate if a company is a good working environment to work in, e.g. supportive and friendly? That's a good question.
That's a great question. It's really difficult. I think the people you meet throughout that process have got to be where you really anchor that. So you've got to ask them the right questions about the environment, what it's like. I joined Compare the Market in May, and one of my big reasons for joining was that the leadership team that I would be working with is super collaborative. I picked that up from the interview process and through the questions that I asked and how they asked me questions. It might have been Muireann said earlier that you're not just there to be interviewed, you're there to interview as well, right? So use that opportunity. Look at what's publicly available, right? So how much do they talk about their culture? How much do they try and give you an insight into it? And how much of it's surface material versus real material? Try and find people who work there. So if you're interested in Compare the Market, come along to something like this and listen to me and Muireann and Jordan and Sarah talk about what our experiences are, and ask us difficult questions as well, which some of you have done today, and see how we respond to them, see how we think about them. There's no other good way of doing it, right? Marketing's so good in this world that you've got to ask the right questions.
One of my favourite questions to ask in an interview, because again, you mentioned asking questions is just as important because you want to know whether it's a working place for you. So one of my favourite questions is, tell me the most challenging thing about your job here, because it can give you a really interesting perspective. Because, you know, one time I was in an interview and they said, oh yeah, I get really annoyed that we only deploy to production every 2 weeks. And I'm like, okay, I can live with that. Like that's not going to be a huge issue for me. Whereas if they said something about, you know, particularly me, and I care so much about diversity, that if they said, I really wish this company focused more on diversity, or, you know, I've just had a child and I didn't, you know, I think it can really give you an idea of like, hopefully they're being honest, and it can really give you an idea of like, okay, is this, and you know, and if you've got a variation of people as well, you know, if you've got a developer and then like, you know, someone from HR and, you know, various people, like ask them all to answer it, because again, if they're all from different departments, you'll get different feedback from all of them. And it's yeah, it's a really great question to ask, so take a note of that now. I realize now we are out of time. Okay, last question. How have you handled working from home? I think that's quite a nice, good final question.
Yeah, well, I think like everyone, it's been a challenge, right? I think, so, you know, at the CTM, they've been very good, and we've had like loads of surveys going, is everyone okay? And, you know, how is everyone now? So they've been great at like, you know, giving those touch points to people. But I think no matter how good a company is at kind of, you know, trying to support everyone, it still sucks. So, you know, it's still a bit rubbish for everyone to be working from home. I think we all, you know, one of the things I most enjoy is like going in and talking to people and, you know, collaborating on work and collaborating and doing stuff. And it is that much harder with working from home. But I think we are kind of getting used to, you know, the kind of constant Zoom meetings and constant, you know, slacking and stuff like that. So I think you do have to create periods in the day of like taking breaks out for yourself. So and our team, with the kind of, you know, they say that they regularly go for walks and often doing other things, and just kind of reinforcing that, hey, it's okay to take a break, and, you know, you need time for yourself as well. And I think a few of the teams that I work with as well, they have regular meetings during the day where they just like get on a call just to, you know, shoot the breeze and play some Scribble and, you know, just play around for a bit. And I think that's really key as well. But I don't think it's hard. It's really hard for everyone, really.
Yeah, for me personally, I've had to adapt by creating routines, like and keeping the collaboration factor theme going, because obviously it's harder to maybe working as collaboratively as you would do if you were in the office. But like, if in my team, we try to do kind of like social activities on a Friday evening. We try to pair as much as possible. So obviously we have the webcams and mics going and everything like that. So trying to just create routines, keep the collaboration going with team members is how I found myself adapting in this weird time.
I do want to say one thing though, is that funnily enough, I have struggled with working from home, but I actually did work from home like a lot before pandemic hit, before COVID hit. I used to work from home 2 or 3 days a week. So it really should have been, you know, second nature to me. But even I kind of struggled with the constant always working from home. So
yeah, it's really forced me to learn how to communicate. Right, it's really forced me to do that. And it's not just about walking up to someone, tapping them on the shoulder, saying how's it going. I've actually got to put some effort in to do that now versus bumping into people. And I think we found some really good ways of doing that. I think our kind of donut app where we meet someone new every week is really cool. I've really enjoyed doing that. I think that it forces you to reach out to people and start to build relationships with them that you wouldn't really have done before. So I think that's also really good. I'm loving the commute. It's so much shorter.
Sarah, anything you want to add?
Yeah, I kind of echo what everyone said. There's been pros and cons, definitely. I think that Compare the Market has been great with the transition to working from home, and there's been lots of support in the team to kind of make that office feel, where you kind of like we play games, like we try and do it daily, where we just have a moment to kind of catch up, not about work, and that's really nice. Yeah, so it's definitely ups and downs, but it's great to have the opportunity to work completely remotely to see what that's like. I might not have had the opportunity otherwise. Obviously, it would have been better in better circumstances, but an interesting experience.
Cool. Well, thank you so much to all our panelists for today. A huge thank you to Compare the Market. Next time the apprenticeship programme opens, we will put a link to it on our job board, and we will make sure that it is advertised on our Slack and on our Twitter. So make sure you're in there, following there, and we will make sure to share it. And if you've got any questions about that programme when we advertise it, I'm sure I can help link you with someone from Compare the Market to answer any questions you have. I'm offering on your behalf, but I'm sure they'll be willing to help, you know, in any way they can to, you know, help, you know, people from codebar get on that. So a huge thank you to everyone for coming. Huge thank you to our panelists, and enjoy the rest of your evening. Thank you.